Hi, welcome back. Hunt March 7th came out not too long ago, and while I didn't make a video about her, some of the gameplay you'll see in this video is from me, so maybe it counts. Anyway, March definitely is one of the best sub-DPS characters in the game, and is in turn one of the best 4-stars in the game. Now I'm taking on a daunting task here. I'm rating all 4 stars on Honkai Star Rail. Before we get started, you need to like and subscribe right now for more content like this in the future, and join the Express Train Discord server for a community filled with content like this, and to catch up on any meta changes that may happen. If I miss anything about any character, make sure to comment down below and correct me. Now let's get on to it. First, the rules. So, since a 4-star character isn't really an archetype but a character rating, it may be tough to normalize a rating that covers all characters from DPSs to support, so I'm gonna do it in groups. Of course, everyone is at E6. We're gonna start with DPS characters, and it goes without saying, we're gonna start with Hunt March 7th. Now, despite how insanely biased I am about March, I don't have to inflate the rating at all. She's very good. Now, while her preservation path is regrettable, her Hunt path version is probably the best 4-star currently in the game. Her personal damage is comparable to 5-star characters, but honestly she is barely able to do her enhanced basic attack once per cycle, which is a huge disadvantage. However, with the right applicator she can still do it enough. She also has some huge buffs for whoever she assigns as her master. She can increase the master's speed by 10.8%, their crit damage by 60%, and their break effect by 36% after she does her enhanced basic attack. This makes her viable in any crit or break effect team. She also has a few bits and pieces in her kits that just make her a lot better, like the choice that allows her to reduce toughness based on the master's type. She's also quite literally the most skill point positive character in the game, like, ever. She just needs to do her skill once and then just keep using her basic attack over and over again. Her Eidolons are also one of the best 4-star Eidolons in the game, since they make her kit so much easier to play because of E1 and E2. They also make her do a lot more damage because of E6. Her best team in the future is going to include Fei Xiao when she comes out, since their kits synergize very well. She's also comparable with Topaz in a Fei Xiao team comp, which means she's 5-star material. So she has a very good spot in the meta currently, and break effect teams, and she's very good with the crit build as well. She's going to get even better in the future when Lynx and Fei Xiao come out for both break effect and crit teams, which means she's a very worthy investment. Not only is she my favorite character, but she's also the best 4-star DPS in the game. She's also a free E6. 10 out of 10. She went from barely used to everyone worshipping her new kit. Insane glow up. I'll give her preservation path a 10 out of 10 in personality, 3 out of 10 in functionality. She can still help you early game maybe, but only early game ever. Now, another character that had an insane glow up is Herda. Now, Herda had her glow up a long time ago when Pure Fiction came out, sure, but she just had another slight glow up recently when Jade came out. Herda is debatably the best Jade activator, especially out of all 4 stars, but even without Jade she still shines brightly in Pure Fiction, especially with Himiko. She doesn't work that well in the MOC and Apocalyptic Shadow, but at least by building Herda you can almost always guarantee getting 40k in Pure Fiction, with the right team of course. She sometimes performs better than Argenti, depending on the rotation. Her kit isn't that complicated, so I'm not gonna go into it. I'll give Herda a 10 out of 10 as well. Very worthy investment. If you've got Pure Fiction covered, you can focus on getting characters to help you cover the other endgame modes, so she's very useful for every account, and especially because she's a free E6. Next up is Qingque. Now, I've never been that big of a fan of the Gambling Gremlin because of how RNG her kit is. While March is the most skill point positive character, QQ is the most skill point negative character. She negative edges your skill points away. However, that doesn't take away from how much damage she can do, 50% of the time maybe, when she decides to work with you. She's better than Jingyuan when her RG decides to be nice, and with Propagation the Simuni, she's one of the best main DPSs to run, but in the end her kit is heavily RNG, and to really make her work, you'd probably want Sparkle on her team, which I'd much rather put with other 5-stars to make them do more damage. QQ gets a 9 out of 10. Next up is Shui. Now, she quickly grew to being one of my favorite characters to play as soon as I finished building her. She was very good for a 4-star character when she came out, and now with Super Break she's even better. She doesn't really have any mechanics in her kit that really capitalize upon Super Break, but since she's built with Break Effect it still works very well. That also allows you to try and ditch crit stats when building her and focus on just Break Effect. Her ult and FUA ignoring weakness types is also very good, and she can be used as a sub DPS as a part of any Break Effect team because of how her FUA stacks work, but she's definitely not the best choice. If you don't want to use her with Super Break to reserve it for another team, then her kit wanting both Break Effect and crit rate is kinda yikes. Split scaling is always a bummer. She's still very good on destruction only though. I'd give her a 7.5 out of 10. Hook is a DPS character. There's honestly not much to be said about her. She does damage, I guess, just not that much. She's not worth building if you have any of the other characters mentioned above or any 5-star DPS at all. Though early game she can be pretty useful, I suppose, and if you're desperate enough, maybe you can use her to apply burn, but it doesn't scale very high. I'd give her maybe a 4 out of 10. She did have that one showcase where she did more damage than Jing Yuan though. Sushang is also a DPS character. She's like Boot Hill, but worse. She does like break effect and she does a lot of damage with break effect. Her ult also advances her action forward, which is very nice, but she doesn't do enough toughness damage to really be considered as a good candidate for a break effect team, or at least any better than any of the characters mentioned before. I would still give her a 5 out of 10 with the right build. She can do a pretty decent amount of damage for a 4-star. Now Danheng and Arlen are certainly some of the characters ever. I wouldn't call them DPS though, more like DPH. That joke is going to become very overused very soon. I wouldn't use either of them at all. I'd give Danheng a 2 out of 10 since he may be useful early game, and Arlen 0 out of 10. Never build this little dumbass. He's not worth it at all. Serval is a lot better than these two. She's pretty good for pure fiction since she's erudition, but then she also applies some shock, which makes her useful as a very early game Kafka applier. She's of course not better than any of the characters you will look into next, but if you're desperate, you can use her, I guess. I'd give her a 4 out of 10. One of the characters that you should definitely use over her is Luca, but there are also better characters out there. He's of course a DOT applier, but he's also just single target, which really sucks. He doesn't have much, if any, def reduction in his kit, but the DOTs he applies are pretty good. Possibly good for Apocalyptic Shadow, maybe. I'll give him about 5 out of 10. I'd much rather use Sampo or Gwenaifen. I'll lump them in together because they get the same rating. I don't see much difference in using these two except maybe elemental differences. They both have good AoE and pretty good DOT scaling, and they both have some damage increase debuffs for DOT. However, Sampo only increases DOT damage, while Gwenaifen's Fire Kiss increases all types of damage, but Sampo increases 28% DOT damage while Gwenaifen only increases about 20 or 21% to all damage, so it evens out maybe. I'll give them both an 8 out of 10 for 4-star characters. Now that we're done with main and sub DPSs, let's move on to the next category, support. This will include both buffers and debuffers. First one we're gonna rate is Misha. Now Misha's kit is a little unfortunate mess. He's destruction for some reason, but he focuses on freezing, while his E2 gives some def reduction. It's pretty nice on destruction only, but he honestly tries way too hard to deal damage and he doesn't deal enough. It would have been much nicer if he's focused on freezing and debuffing a lot more. Still though, it's a pretty unique kit for a destruction character, and for the sake of clearing MOC 12 on destruction only, I hope they make more kits like this. But for an overall 4-star character, I'll give him a 5 out of 10. Next up is Pella, another debuffer. Now she is obviously one of the best characters to build in the game, and while some people swear that Pella is overrated for whatever reason, she's indeed very good. She has a 40% AoE def reduction, and she also has ice res reduction with E2, and she can also cleanse buffs off of enemies. Her technique also reduces def by 20% for 2 enemy turns. She's a very good choice for any DPS, and especially Jing Liu because of that extra ice res reduction. She's only slightly worse than Jiaoqiu, who's a 5-star. You're much better off building Pella, who you probably already have, over getting Jiaoqiu, whose first banner is beside a Sparkle rerun, and before Fei Xiao and Lingsha. So since she's a much better investment than a 5-star, I can give her less than a 10 out of 10 as a 4-star. I did rate her 9 out of 10 in my debuffer list, but this is a different list, comparing her only to other 4-star characters, and not to what a perfect debuffer should be. I did rate her higher than Jiaoqiu, which turned some heads, but since she's a 4-star who's most likely a much better investment than a 5-star, I'm standing by that choice. Anyway, enough yap about Bella. She's good, build her. Now let's move on. Next up is Ting Yun. She's definitely the best 4-star Harmony character currently in the game, and I cannot wait to see whatever her 5-star version will be. Us mere mortals will never be able to comprehend the beauty that form will radiate. Simping aside, she's simply very good. She has a huge attack boost with her skill, which you only need to do once per 3 turns, making her skill point positive. Her burst also grants a huge amount of energy, making her useful for all characters in the game, not just DPS characters, but you'd still want to use it on your DPS because it also has a really good damage percent increase. She also does her own damage by adding an extra tick of lightning damage on top of whoever she applied her skill on. I really don't see anything I'd nitpick about Ting Yun's kit whatsoever. She's insane for a 4-star character. That's another one on the 10 out of 10 list. Next up is Yukong. She provides a huge attack boost with her skill and a diabolical crit rate crit damage boost with her burst. She also has some pretty nice damage scaling. Her kit also doesn't really require any specific artifact substats, making her pretty good for sub DPS if you focus on crit and attack stats. Now you may think she's insane, but she's also very finicky to play. At E0 she's almost impossible to get right, but at E6 it does get a lot easier. Still though, she's pretty hard to play correctly, but if you can, you get a huge boost to your damage. I did rate her a bit lower than I would like in my Harmony character list, but I honestly think she's a little underrated after some thoughts. She's still probably nowhere near the best, and she also can be used that effectively for DOT and break effect teams. Still, she has a diabolical damage boost for a 4-star character when played correctly, so she's usually slotted in instead of a sustain when hyper sweats want to make their DPS do a bajillion damage. I'll give Yukong an 8 out of 10. She's very easy to build, so she's a very good investment. If you have any other 5-star Harmony though, or just Tingyun, I'd use them over her for sure. Asta's next, and she's definitely fell from grace. She used to be one of the most praised characters, but now barely anyone uses her. She's barely mentioned anywhere. Still though, that doesn't take away from her speed buff, and her attack buff is alright, I guess. It's not much though, and she isn't exactly skill point positive. And if I remember correctly, because I'm too lazy to go and check, her burst only apply speed and nothing else, which is kinda yikes. Her Eidolons complement her kit very nicely though. I'd give her a 7 out of 10. She's pretty useful at the start, but once you get literally any of the other aforementioned support characters, you should probably use them instead. If she had an energy recharge buff with her burst, she'd probably be as good, if not better, than Tingyun. Unfortunately, Huohuo beat her to it. She is better than Yukong for DOT teams though. Next up is Hanya, the most disappointing 4-star Harmony character. She's very beautiful and has a great personality, but her kit is very lackluster, especially after Sparkle. I honestly never got it. You spend a skill point to gain 2 skill points a couple turns later, thus making her skill point positive, or you could just do a basic attack which would give you the same amount of skill points. Now of course, applying her skill gives a small damage boost overall and her burst gives some speed and attack, but I wouldn't say it's any better than any of the other Harmony characters, making her probably the worst unfortunately. What a waste of good character design. Honestly, I'd give her a 5 out of 10. Next up, sustained characters. We already gave Preservation March a regrettable rating, but let's just forget about that. She's in her DPS era. Gallagher is definitely the best 4-star sustain in the game, and he's even comparable to Luocha in healing and to Huohuo in overall value. However, a 5-star character is coming who's just a better Gallagher. However, on top of that, so far it doesn't look like she's that much better than he is, and maybe another Jiaochu situation with her, unfortunately. But at least she's not getting hella nerfed every beta version. Now putting Lynx aside, Gallagher is very good as an overall sustain, but he's even better for break effect teams. First, let's talk about his damage increasing value. His talent increases break damage taken by enemies with Besotted by around 12%. Now that may not seem like a lot, but remember the break damage is usually very big and done very frequently, so that 12% will translate very well into your damage numbers. Using his ult also advances his action forward by 100%, which is very useful. This makes him very good for characters like March 7th, he's one of the best applicators for her actually. His skill also has cleanse and an effect res increase, Bailu could never. His healing is definitely the best for a 4-star, it's definitely comparable to Luocha, possibly could be better. He definitely has more value in break teams than Luocha. Using his technique also applies Besotted on enemies as well, which makes it so you don't have to use his ultimate at the start of the battle. His E6 increases his break effect by 20% and weakness break efficiency by 20%, which is very OP. He's for sure one of the best characters for break teams and one of the best characters overall. He can deal some toughness damage before your main DPS goes for the break and starts dealing super break. And then he can deal a huge amount of super break himself and then also keep your team alive. He's definitely comparable to Huohuo in value. And he's a 4-star, I'd easily give him a 10 out of 10. I'm curious to see whether or not Lynx will be that much better than him when V5 of the betas come out, but we'll have to see. Maybe it's another Jiaochu situation and I'll have to dog on another 5-star character. If she's a lot better than him to the point she's a better investment, I'd probably knock him down to an 8, possibly still a 9 out of 10. But if she's just marginally better than him, I'd keep him at 10 out of 10, possibly 9.5 out of 10. Next up is Natasha. She's a pretty good healer. She cleanses. She doesn't do much more than that. She's the most basic you can get. She's good at the start, not very good for endgame. I'd still totally use her over Bailu though. You definitely need cleanse. I'd give her a 6 out of 10. Lynx is definitely a lot better than Natasha. She has better healing than Natasha and AoE cleanse. She also increases attack based on her HP to enemies with the survival response buff she applies. She also increases effect res and gives 1 debuff resist to allies with the survival response buff as well. She also has some built-in effect res herself. Last thing to mention about her is that she increases the chances of her preservation destruction characters to be targeted, making her a good applicator for Clara, Blade, and Yunli. I'll give her a 7.5 out of 10. And I'm pretty sure that's it. If I missed anyone, I'm very sorry, but I looked at the character screen for like 10 minutes to make sure I didn't miss anyone. Let's take a look at everyone who's got a 10 out of 10. March 7th, who's the best 4-star sub DPS, Herda, who's the best 4-star main DPS, Tingyun, who's the best 4-star Harmony character, Pella, who's the best 4-star debuffer, and Gallagher, who's the best 4-star sustain. So, thank you so much for watching. Like, comment, subscribe, and ring the bell for more content like this in the future, and join the Express Train Discord server for a community filled with content like this, and I will see you next time. Bye bye.